I am a clinical director and clinical consultant at CAIO. So today we are going to be talking about our top 3 strategies for navigating challenging behaviors. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and that way we can get started on our presentation for today. Alrighty. So like I mentioned, we are going to go over top 3 strategies to navigating challenging behaviors. And this can be applied both in homes and also in our school settings. This is going to be our agenda for today. First, we are going to go into how we define behaviors or a behavior. Then we'll discuss how to identify functions of a behavior or behaviors, meaning how can we identify why a behavior is occurring. Then we'll go into those 3 strategies for navigating challenging behaviors. So how to reduce those challenging unwanted behaviors. And then lastly, we'll go into questions and answers. Feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go. I will stop and look and answer questions throughout the presentation. Or if you like to hold off to the very end, either way is fine with me. Okay, so before we go into our presentation, this is who we are and what we do. So CAIO is a team of over 800 professionals in behavioral health, ranging from behavior analysts down to program supervisors, our behavior therapists who implement the direct therapy, and then our admin staff. We provide a variety of different services, including ABA therapy in-home, in centers, and also via telehealth. We provide parent training, behavioral consultation, and school and community shadow support. So we are kind of in all the different types of settings and communities. This is where we serve. We serve in major metro areas in over 10 plus states across the United States. If you like to look into more of our services, feel free to take a look at this link. I'll be sending a copy of this training presentation to Kevin to share with you all. Okay, so now going into our presentation, determining the function of a behavior. So what is a behavior trying to tell us? And when I talk about behavior, this doesn't just mean inappropriate behaviors or unwanted behaviors, but it also can mean that we're talking about those appropriate behaviors. However, in this training, we're probably going to go more into inappropriate behaviors. So there are 4 main functions of behaviors. The way that it's been really helpful to remember the 4 functions is through this acronym EATS, E-A-T-S. E is for escape avoidance. A is attention from others. T is tangible, meaning getting access to tangibles like things, activities, environments. And S is sensory, self-soothing. Now we'll go into detail about each 4 function and what they mean and what they look like. So first, going into escape avoidance. This is when a behavior occurs because a child wants to get away from something or someone. So this can be delaying or postponing a demand, a non-preferred task, maybe a non-preferred person, or even a non-preferred setting. Maybe it can be homework, bath time if bath time is not preferred, maybe seeing a specific teacher or a specific adult. Anything that we do to avoid or escape that would be escape avoidance. So here's an example of escape avoidance behavior. We have a dad maybe asking their child to go for a walk. And let's assume going for a walk is non-preferred. The child says no and flops on the floor. Once dad sees that, the behavior of flopping and vocal protest, the dad then says, fine, we'll just go back home inside. We won't go for a walk. So as you can see, the child has learned that every time they vocally protest and flop to the ground when a non-preferred activity is presented, like going for a walk, they now know they don't have to go on a walk, and that demand is removed. Our second function is attention from others. This is when a behavior occurs because a child is trying to gain social attention or a reaction from a person or people. This can be familiar people like family members, teachers, but it could also come from strangers. So maybe someone on the sidewalk, maybe an acquaintance, just a random person. This social attention can be positive or negative. So positive meaning cuddles, maybe giving a loving, like a lot of attention, like cuddles, hugs, and so forth. Or negative meaning reprimands, being yelled at, punishment, maybe timeout, those kind of things. So for this example, we have a mom that picks up the phone to make a call. As soon as that mom picks up the phone, the child starts crying, "Mama." The mom quickly hangs up the phone and says, "Yes, love." So here the child has learned that every time mom makes a phone call and that attention is diverted from them, they cry, mom then provides that attention to the child. And again, feel free to ask any questions in the chat if you have any as we go through the presentation. Our third function is tangibles. So access to tangibles. This can be, again, items, it can be activities or environments. This behavior occurs because a child is trying to physically get access to something they want or need, like an item or activity. And this is most likely something that is preferred, motivating, and they want this item. So in this example, the sibling is playing with a toy. So maybe we have an older sibling playing with a toy. The younger sibling then pulls the sibling's hair, pull the hair, and then older sister or brother drops a toy and runs off crying. Now the younger sibling has a toy. So the youngest sibling has learned that if I pull my big sister or brother's hair, they let go of the toy, then I get what I want. One common example that I see often is maybe around electronics. Maybe it's time to go to bed and turn off electronics and no more screen time. Maybe your child starts to scream, cry, and then you just give them the iPad and that kind of stops the crying. So now the child has learned that I can engage in this screaming behavior in order to get access to that tablet or that preferred item. Our fourth function is sensory. So sensory is when a behavior occurs because the behavior is internally pleasing to the child in some way. This can be due to any one or maybe multiple of our five senses like sight, smell, hearing, taste, or touch. Not only can it be self-soothing, like internally pleasing, but we can also be engaging in sensory behaviors to remove an unpleasant feeling. So in this example, we have a parent maybe just going about their day. Maybe they're working, preparing dinner, getting the evening settled, and then the child starts biting their nails or rocking back and forth. So the child biting their nails or rocking back and forth has nothing to do with the parent or the caregiver. It's just a behavior that they are doing that is self-soothing to themselves. In a classroom, maybe you see a student tapping their foot on the floor, or maybe they're tapping the table. And that could be that it's self-soothing, providing some sort of sensory input for them. An example of removing an unpleasant sensory feeling or internal feeling could be a child maybe wearing noise canceling headphones because maybe the sound, like loud sudden noises, startle them. So putting on those canceling headphones could remove that loud noise from them. Okay, so now that we know what the four functions of behaviors are and why it's occurring, what do we do? How do we teach new skills? Or how do we reduce these challenging behaviors? Oops. So these are our top 3 behavior strategies that will help reduce those challenging behaviors, regardless of the functions of those 4 functions of behaviors. And they're pretty effective for if not all of those functions. So our first one is choices. We'll go over what choices are. Then we'll go into the PREMAC principle and then our token system. So number one, choices. This is my ultimate favorite. So choices enhance a person's quality of life. We're providing that buy-in for the individual, but also increasing that motivation. So instead of giving the child one option for everything, we're giving them choices of what they can do and what they can use material-wise. So I'll go into a few different examples of choices. I use choices pretty often with my nephew, also with the clients that I work with, the students that I work with, and it's pretty effective for all of them. So examples of choices, lunchtime. Maybe for lunch, we give two choices of food options. Do you want an apple for lunch or do you want a banana? And that way they have the buy-in of what they want to eat. Maybe a writing task. Do you want to start off with your sentences or do you want to start off with, say, a word scramble worksheet? So giving them an option of what they want to do first. Or even math tasks. Do you want to do 2 problems or do you want to do 5 problems? And that way, again, they have the say in that choice, but they still have to complete the work. Also transitions. So maybe you're transitioning from a preferred to a non-preferred activity, but giving them 2 options of non-preferred. Hey, after we finish playing with bubbles, do you want to go inside and do math or do you want to do science? Or even breaking it down, do you want to do counting or do you want to do identifying letters, whatever it is. So again, you're giving the child a say as to what they want to do. Our second strategy is called the PREMAC principle, also known as Grandma's Law. The PREMAC principle states that making the opportunity to engage in a high probability behavior contingent on the low occurrence of a low frequency behavior will function as a reinforcement for that low frequency behavior. That is a mouthful. However, what it means is that we want to be able to reinforce our child or the student for engaging in a more difficult task and give them something fun to play with after. So you might use the statements, first you do this and then you do that. Or if you do this, then you get that. So in this example, we say first do homework, which is that more difficult task, then you can go play. And that play is that more reinforcing, motivating task. So that they know that if they do this more difficult task, reinforcement is to follow. Sometimes we just assume that our students or our children just know that, hey, you do homework, then, by finishing it, that is reinforcing. Yes, it might be to us. However, our students and children might just need that extra push of knowing what their reinforcement is afterwards. A couple other examples are, first we wash hands and then we can go outside, or first we wash hands and then we have our lunch. Maybe lunch is reinforcing. Here are a few other examples. So when you have finished your math worksheets, you can read a book. So assuming that math worksheets are a little bit more difficult and then reading is a preferred task. Our second example is first write in your journal, then you can have free play. And lastly, first you finish your dinner, then you may watch TV. Again, always that first activity or first task is always that non-preferred or more difficult task, and that then is always that reinforcer. Token system. So this is our third effective strategy. Also one of my other favorites. It's a system in which an individual earns tokens for targeted behaviors. Once the individual has collected a predetermined number of tokens, they can trade those in for an item or an activity they desire. So you might see this as a point system, a class point system, maybe a star jar or marble jar, can be just marking tallies on a piece of paper. But essentially, you are reinforcing the child after they engage in a certain number of behaviors, and then they can exchange those points or those tokens for an external reinforcer, like a prize in a prize box, maybe extra free play. They get maybe an extra break and so forth. These are some examples of our token system. So they can be super simple, or you can make them as elaborate as you want them to be. One thing that I like to really consider are the child's preferred activity. So if I have a client or student that enjoys, let's say, Paw Patrol, I might incorporate Paw Patrol into that token board, because maybe stars don't have any kind of positive association to them, but they see Paw Patrol and they're like, oh, I get 5 little puppies on there, then I get a prize in the prize box. If you're maybe working with older students and maybe sticking to stars or maybe just marbles in a jar, you can make it as simple as you want it to be. So before we go into questions and answers, I kind of want to hear from our, if you all feel comfortable sharing any experiences that you may have had using token systems, or maybe even first and then, and also maybe choices, maybe students or with children that you have, if you feel comfortable sharing.
So I think there's a couple folks that joined a little bit late. We'll reiterate. If you have any questions you want to speak, you can either put your information in the chat box, or you can use the raise your hand feature, and I'll let you ask your question or share your input. I'm also going to put the sign-in sheet in the chat box one more time. If you haven't signed in, please sign in so we have a good accounting of who attended our training. So yeah, please use the raise your hand feature if you want to share an experience or an example or ask any questions about what we've covered so far.
Awesome. And I see Bill here says that his son uses a point system at school and banks points to buy rewards from a menu. Yeah, I absolutely love that. You can also, one thing that is not mentioned here, but you can also kind of delay or kind of time how when you want your child or your student to earn that reinforcer. So maybe, it's at the end of the day, once they hit a certain number of points or tokens, then they get that reinforcement throughout the day, or maybe they kind of store those points, and at the end of the week, they can earn something larger, like a pizza party, or a larger, toy or some sort. So you can either do it short term or kind of push it to long term. It really depends on the child's ability to be able to wait for longer periods of time. If it's something that's relatively new, then we do suggest kind of using that short-term token system and then eventually working up to a longer term where they can wait a few days or a week or so. Great, thank you for sharing, Bill. Has anyone ever used choices or first and then statements or even boards? I see a question here. Let's see. I have a question here from Elena, but I'm not sure if I quite understand this.
I'm going to let her try to speak.
Yeah, of course.
Elena, are you there?
Yes, sorry, but I missed some words. So my question is for token system example. It is in case have the children have a behavior problem, or what is the difference between have behavior problem or stress, or in case what is the next step for identify is behavior or mental health support? So that's his question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the first step is, getting maybe an input from the child's pediatrician or other professionals as well. Because if it is something that is contributing to more of mental health, maybe some psychological aspect, I wouldn't say ABA or behavioral tactics alone would be effective. They may also be, in addition to maybe cognitive behavioral therapy or other types of psychological therapies, in addition to behavioral tactics, may be more effective. So I think that if you're concerned whether if it's behavioral or a mixture of behavioral and mental health, definitely consulting with other professionals like a pediatrician, teachers, school psychologists, or counselor, and kind of taking those next steps from there. I hope that answered your question.
Then just from like the school perspective, for me, I think there sometimes is a lot of overlap, right? Mental health, stress, anxiety, and some of these challenging behaviors, they can definitely interact, right? So I think those suggestions that Eva suggested, if you're seeing these things both at home and at school, your IEP team should be supporting you with the school behaviors and potentially helping like align between what's happening at school and in home. But it's not a super clear, like, this is one thing, this is another thing, right? So I think really having clear support systems, knowing kind of what's happening on the medical and kind of physiological side of things is really important, as well as knowing kind of, again, what works and what doesn't work for your specific student. So
Yeah, thank you.
I see another question from Michelle. What is your strategy for aggressive behavior?
Great question. So what I would first go to, regardless of what kind of behavior it is, but whether if it's aggression, maybe tantrum or what have you, first you want to identify that function of the behavior. So if we go back, let's see. Here, we want to figure out why the child is engaging in aggression. So maybe looking at past occurrences or maybe even going forward, future occurrences and saying, okay, is this child engaging in aggression because they want to escape or avoid something? Or is it because they want to get attention or get attention removed from someone? Or is it because they want to get access to an object or item, or is it sensory? So once you first identify the function of that behavior, then you can implement, actually all three of these strategies will be effective, but having that key piece of identifying the function will help you kind of pinpoint why it's happening. So Michelle, if you have if you want to share, if you think maybe it's one of those 4 functions, we can see how we can apply the strategies to that aggressive behavior you might be seeing. But yes, so first you want to identify that function of behavior and then go from there. However, all 3 strategies that we talked about today are effective for these 4 functions. Of course, no problem. Okay, so I'm going to go back down here. I know that this was a pretty, a little shorter presentation, but any additional questions or even comments or feedback that any of you may have regarding personal experiences with students or children that you work with?
Elena wants to ask another question.
Okay.
Bring her back. Go ahead, Elena.
I thank you. So, for example, and I know have very hard. My son only have a speech. This is the IP is very low. So for one time say, I'm sorry, I feeling very stressed. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. So I have direction for my son, but in other times it's very, for example, in the pandemic, I think it's very hard for finding the school, for example, is a new for check the new friends, everything. So what is the other? I don't know. I think for mothers working very hard for, I don't know, other support in the school or more, I don't know, more guides for a light stress, maybe tips, something.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I quite understand the question.
It's only for example, the IP is very different each person, right? For example, my son have very only have I don't have any disabilities, any body disabilities. For example, another person or their friends have different disabilities. In my case, I can work directly with my son. Or okay, you tell me have a stress, you tell me have a lot of confusion for new friends and new school in person. But my question is, what support you have for other students, can eat a lot, talk a lot for expression, So what is the next step for help directly in the students? For maybe mom, she help you for no can extend what you feeling express directly with the mom. This is what my, no questions, is more support maybe in the other different disabilities, maybe for tips for.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I think, I don't know if Kevin, if you have more of a clear answer on this and how others with different disabilities might get additional support at school, but I think it definitely depends on the evaluation and the assessments that they might conduct, but I'm not, maybe Kevin, if you have a little bit more to add on to that.
Yeah, Elena, if you want to send me a chat in the chat box directly to me with your information, I can kind of connect you with whoever your right person is, so that we can kind of figure out what's going on the school side. There's a little couple details that we would want to kind of find out what's going on more. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's a help a lot. I send the information. Thank you.
Perfect.
Of course. I see
We
we
have a
have,
question from Lucia. I think this is for you, Eva. Just like, what is your, like, what services do you guys provide at CAIO, and what does that look like, and how do referrals happen? I don't know if you want to speak to that.
yeah, of course. So yes, so it depends on a couple things. So what you would want to do is, I can also actually pull up a link here. So we provide in-home and also community-based applied behavior analysis therapy. Also, we provide support in schools as well. But if you are looking for services, you can contact our intake department, in which you will be connected to a intake specialist. And they will give you kind of like a rundown as to what the intake and assessment process looks like. Typically, it does require a diagnostic report from like a psychologist or diagnosing physician, like a pediatrician, then recommending ABA services. And then we go through an assessment with a behavior analyst. And then if our behavior analyst does see that that based on their findings that ABA would be appropriate for your child, then they would submit a request to the insurance for drug therapy. I am going to link. Let's see. I will put a link in the chat. And if you go here, you can set up a phone call, a phone appointment with an enrollment specialist in English or in Spanish. And to follow up with Lucia's question, what insurances do we take? So we do accept a variety of different insurances. I don't have off the top of my head which ones we accept, but we do accept a lot of different ones. It depends on the subgroup and the network that you have, but during the phone appointment, the enrollment specialist can see if possibly if your insurance is covered, or if we cover your insurance, and they can go from there. And then I see another comment here. So the behavior sometimes is getting better. The next week it suddenly turns very bad. And why does this happen? So yes, this can definitely happen. It's pretty common most of the time. So one day you see that this behavior is getting better, maybe you see a decrease in that challenging behavior, but all of a sudden the next day or next week, it's like, oh, came back again. This can be due to a variety of different factors. One of the main reasons would probably be that seeing if those strategies you're implementing are consistent. Maybe not just with you, but with across all the adults that this person is coming into contact with. So going back to, okay, are maybe caregivers, are they all consistent with these expectations? Or is one caregiver reinforcing this inappropriate behavior? if we find that there's some inconsistency, that definitely can kind of then give that child mixed signals of like, oh, okay, with one person, let's say this aggression is getting reinforced, but with these other people, it's not. And even if it's just getting reinforced by one person, that can kind of continue that behavior to occur. So it doesn't have to kind of happen every day. It can stop. And then all of a sudden, if the child learns, oh, hey, this worked with Uncle Billy, I'm gonna try it again. So as long as you guys are consistent as much as possible, then you will also see that behavior decrease consistently. Of course, there are other factors like environmental factors that can contribute to that, maybe changes in schedules, routines, and even physiological factors like illness, lack of sleep. So taking all of those into consideration, but definitely consistency is key. Thank you for your question. I thought I saw a question in the Q&A, but I lost it there.
I took care of it.
Oh, thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns, feedback?